Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books? Try listening to them on audio, featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies. Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. With stories from your favorite Star Wars movies, television shows, and comics, you'll have plenty to keep you entertained. Start listening now wherever audiobooks are sold.
This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee is Dan Madsen, who is no stranger to Star Wars fans. He is a wonderful gentleman, an intelligent man, and the perfect person to talk about the power of story in fiction. Dan, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I'm really happy to be here. It's cool. I've listened to your show before, so I'm excited to be here now.
I'm happy too. Of course, we've chatted on email for years, and then we finally got to meet at Celebration Chicago last year. And then through conversing and visiting, we found out they were both huge Twainiacs, huge fans of Mark Twain, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, I don't find that many people, to be honest, just especially within the Star Wars community, that are as passionate about Star Wars as they are Mark Twain. And man, when we're kind of like brothers from another mother. When I found that out, I'm kind of like, wow, okay, that's pretty doggone cool.
Totally agree. And we've got the first name down. We are all set.
We got good names. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful because, and the reason I bring up Twain, besides the fact that he's a genius, is that he has this famous quote, and of course, as well as I do, if not more than I do, how misquoted he is. In fact, whenever there's like this rosy, hallmarky quote, my wife will say to me, "Did Twain say this?" And almost unavoidably, the answer is no, because he saw the world through a certain lens, but he experienced a lot of pain in his life. He lost loved ones. He saw atrocities committed by men to other men, to other humans. And he understood. But one of his great quotes about fiction is that fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't.
Yep.
Yeah. Talk to me about that quote. Yeah. What do you think that means?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is that truth can take you anywhere in real life. I mean, the bottom line is that fiction, there's certain things that are set down that you have to follow in writing a story. But when it comes to the truth, you are, anything can happen. And sometimes it's surprising what might happen. And I think that's ultimately what is behind that quote. What do you think?
I think I love what you said. I agree with you. And I think, I've used this quote in my classrooms before. And because sometimes people will say, why, Mr. Zaire, why do you care about fiction? Why do you care about these movies? Why do you care about Star Wars? Because it's not real. And I said, no, of course it isn't real. But what are they really talking about in these movies? When Luke Skywalker decides to switch off his targeting computer and trust in the Force, what he's really believing in is things that he can't see. It can be religion. It can be believe in yourself. It can be developing self-confidence. It's saying a lot of things without spelling it out for you. And I think fiction sticks to possibilities, but is able to use it through a certain critical lens that makes people who are more closed-minded more likely to listen to the message, whether they mean to or not.
See, that's why you're the teacher, because your answer is so much better than mine. You would get your message across in the classroom so much better.
You're very
true. Everything you said is absolutely right. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and that's the brilliance of. And I know we're talking about Star Wars in some sense, but I think that that's the brilliance of Twain, is that he was he had a way of looking at things and a way of writing that would make you stop and look at a different way of the world, and maybe and I think there's so many different books of his that suggest that, and you and I were just talking about Huckleberry Finn, and I think Huckleberry Finn is a book that can, make you stop and think about what he's really trying to say, and if it's different from the way you had thought about things, especially at the time he wrote that book. It was revolutionary in a lot of ways. So,
yes,
that's where I think people forget that. And I hope they never forget who Twain was, because I said once before, I said he's the Lincoln of our literature, and I truly believe that he is. He's a genius, and everybody should read his books. And what's the quote he said? His books are like water. Everybody.
yeah.
You remember his quotes?
Yeah, it's something to the effect of the great works are wine. Mine is water. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody likes water, or something to that effect.
Yes.
And
Self-effacing.
Yes, it was really. And he's. And there's so many quotes of his, that are truly his, that are brilliant. And, I have a whole book of Mark Twain quotes that, when there's any subject matter that's going on in the world, I open that up and it's got, about this or about that, and it's got a whole list of different quotes of his. And there's always something brilliant in one of those.
It's very true. And the great thing, what the greats do is that whatever their work is, whatever era they're writing, whether it's Shakespeare or Twain or the brilliance of Abraham Lincoln or who have you, it resonates in any era and any time. Like you just said, you could take many quotes from Twain, political, racial, storytelling, just observances of human behavior, and it still fits. And I think that is one of the reasons why Star Wars, and you and I were talking before the show started, why Star Trek as well, why they speak so profoundly to us, because they take these ideas and these notions about human behavior and how we tick and what we are passionate about and what we will not tolerate, and they put them in such a way that in a story that we can't forget. So you obviously have a huge history with Lucasfilm and Star Wars. You're responsible for many wonderful things that are very much a part of Star Wars fandom. And obviously you saw quite a bit of this through experiences working with Lucasfilm and George Lucas.
I did. It's funny because Star Wars spoke to me from the moment I saw it. On one level, I was 14 years old when I first saw Star Wars. And on the one level, it hit me as just this amazing space adventure, giant spaceships and Wookiees and droids and blasters and all of that, and that appealed to my kid side that just went crazy over that kind of stuff. But then, the more I watched it and as I grew up with the films, I started realizing that there's, a real message here of good versus evil and, utilization of the Force, and the characters were just so well defined, and just this unique unique nature to it that I had never seen in any other film before. And I was just so drawn to it. And the first time I got to meet George Lucas was I flew out to Skywalker Ranch for an interview with him, and I was escorted into the main house there and up the steps to his office, and it's this beautiful, mahogany wood walls, and there's this massive painting, right before you go in the door to his office. I can't remember what it is now, but it was some classical painting that probably cost millions of dollars. And you walked into his office, and it's just, it looks like something from the turn of the century, kind of Tiffany style lamps, and except they're real Tiffany lamps, not fake ones. And as I said, the mahogany walls, and then there's Maxfield Parrish paintings, original paintings above the fireplace. And George was sitting over there at his desk writing something. And Lynn Hale, the head of PR, was the one who brought me into his office, and we sat on these big giant couches by the front window there. And I was in a bit awe because, I thought, this is the man who created this entire mythology, this amazing story that has spanned all over the world and has influenced and entertained people everywhere. And you know what? It kind of dawned on me. It just kind of amazed me. I thought, there was a time, because everybody in the world, almost everybody, knows what Star Wars is. I mean, I'm sure there are some backwater places that people have never seen the movies or heard of them, but most civilized world nations, most people have at least heard of Star Wars. And I thought, there was a time when there was only one person on this planet that knew what Star Wars was, and that was George Lucas. And it was in his head, and that was he was the only one who knew about it. And then it got, spread out to the rest of the world, and now it's become this amazing, story that is truly, I think, something that's going to last on and on through the ages. I really believe that there are only so many things that I think are timeless. And there are stories, that are timeless. But Star Wars is one of those things that I truly believe 100 years from now, people will still be watching it, talking about it, reading about it, because it's not something that's dated. It has a meaning forever, and that's one of the things that I'm most fascinated by is things that can live beyond their own time. And that's one of the reasons why, I'm so interested in Mark Twain and Abraham Lincoln and these two greats of our civilization. But there's more, obviously many more that are from all over the world. But those two, for some reason, kind of grabbed my attention. But yeah, Star Wars is just, I can't even imagine how. I often wonder, 100 years from now, what will people be saying about Star Wars? Mm-hmm. How will they remember it? And they'll say, wow, how it must have been amazing to live when those movies were first coming out, to actually get to see them for the first time in a theater, and to meet the people who were in them. And, you got to meet Harrison Ford, I mean,
yes,
100 years from now, nobody will be able to meet Harrison Ford, but they're like, I wonder what it was like to meet Harrison Ford, and he's a timeless dude. I think he's somebody that's going to be remembered for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He's a classic actor,
He is in the kind of the classic Hollywood on and off screen, I think.
Yes, I agree. I mean, he's somebody that I respect for his life off the screen as well as the roles he's played on screen.
Yeah, you brought up so many good points. The thing that I think draws us back to these stories and storytelling in general, as we mentioned, is the power of the narrative to transport us and to kind of dive into these themes that are timeless. These ideas, they're timeless. And George Lucas was a guy that had a dream, had a passion, and he refused to give up on it. I mean, that's a wonderful metaphor in and of itself. But what other sort of specific themes or ideas that are replete throughout Star Wars? And heck, you've even been in a Star Wars film. What do you think it is about these? What specific themes kind of jump out to you?
Well, I think it's very in simplistic terms, good versus evil, good triumphing over evil. I mean, obviously we have individual films where the evil wins in certain parts, but I still think the power of a belief in yourself. I've always been drawn, being a little person, I was always drawn to the message of Yoda. Here George took this this little tiny green man and made him one of the most powerful Jedi anywhere. And he's 3 feet tall. I mean, and the line that he uses in the film with Luke, look at me, judge me by my size, do you? I mean, but man, did that speak to me when I was 16 years old, and I was going through a difficult time, of being a 16-year-old that was extremely different, and you get made fun of, and you don't feel a part of the popular crowd and such. And boy, when I saw that film and I saw Yoda, that spoke directly to me. And ever since then, I've felt this power from the words and the lines that Yoda has had throughout all the films, in fact, but specifically The Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, I mean, I think it's Star Wars is got this kind of message of well, I guess I keep coming back to that good will triumph over evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds kind of simplistic to say that, but I like things that paint things in black and white like that. And I think it makes a lot of sense, and it has a powerful message throughout time.
I agree, but we have this continually growing morally ambiguous kind of culture, and in the fact that when Star Wars was created, George is very specific. Darth Vader is wearing all black; he's the bad guy. Yep. Luke's wearing all white. Leia's wearing all white. Han Solo, who's got this, he didn't say this, but this is the English teacher, and he's wearing this white T-shirt, but he's got a black vest over it. Yeah. So he is good down below, but he's kind of having a hard time masking himself.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, and, go ahead.
No, I'd say it's just I think it's important, and you and I are both parents, and we understand how important. I mean, when I sit down with my son, and, I have 3 kids. I have 20, I have 18, and I have 6. And, they're all at very different stages in their lives. But but we still, you never stop being a dad. You never stop being a parent. And you want to instill in them these kind of values. And I love that you keep talking about good versus evil, because it's probably the most important thing. I think we need to see, I need to see, and I probably could speak for you and say the same thing. We need to see that there is good in the world and that can triumph over evil, because sometimes it can feel really oppressive. Undoubtedly the struggle of the Rebel Alliance against the Empire, or later, the resistance against the First Order is somewhat steeped in truth, because we can understand how you can feel about when things are bad. You sometimes feel like you're just throwing rocks into the ocean, but eventually you make waves on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. The ripple effect of, it will affect others down the line. And I think that's why, and one of the things too that I've loved, and I go back to the original films because they're still my favorites of all of them. They're the ones who influenced me. I grew up with them. They're the ones I still feel, and I love them all. I believe it or not, I love the prequels. I love the sequels. I love them all. There is not a Star Wars film that I dislike. Really, seriously, and I know everybody has. There's obviously a group of our fandom that has strong feelings towards the Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi or whatever. Well, I love them both, so I have no issues in that respect. But the original films are the ones I grew up with, the ones that have influenced me the most. And those films still to this day speak to me about, the power of good to triumph over evil. Even Luke is tempted, it's awfully tempting to turn to the dark side, and his own father is trying to turn him to evil, and Luke resists that. And there's a powerful message there. You're tempted by things every day. Mm-hmm. You look around you and you can see, as you said, there's a morally ambiguous, world we live in today. And, sometimes we get lost in what is good and what is bad. And there's this gray area, and people sometimes get placed in there and think, well, maybe it isn't that bad, but I think that it's important to realize that, and especially it's important to realize that good can still triumph over evil, because I think depending on what your philosophy is, there is still the ability for good to win out after all. And I still believe in the human spirit, and I think that's one of the things that I love about Star Wars is that, you've got strength in these characters. Obviously Princess Leia is an incredibly strong character that, people love. Luke is this innocent, kind of naive farm boy that, ultimately ends up becoming, this powerful Jedi. And Han, is this kind of selfish kind of I'm in it for myself. And he gets turned and realizes that there's a greater thing than him and becomes a part of it. And so there's a lot of different messages in Star Wars, and it's very much like an intricate novel in that the more you watch it, the more you pull apart the different elements of it, you start to see that there's different messages throughout the whole thing. And I think, especially in those original films, that's George working his magic. And it's there even in the prequels too, because this was his story, and he wanted to develop it and flesh it out. And so I still see, for me, and I'm speaking purely from my perspective, I think prequels and the originals, because they are directly done by George, have the most intimate ideas of Star Wars, because they are directly from George. The others are taking George's thoughts and ideas and just expanding and kind of growing extra arms and legs on it. But
yeah,
that's, I don't know, I'm rambling, but that's
I love hearing you
believe
talk.
that. I still believe that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you very much, and you brought up a lot of wonderful points, and I was particularly moved and touched by your conversation about Yoda and how that affected you, where you were at in your life, and I think that's so beautiful. It's very Tolkien-esque, really,
yes,
which is great. And speaking of mythology, and taking this idea of, you think you're the underdog, but guess what? You're going to be the one that's going to take care of us.
That's right. That's right. And that's absolutely right. Yeah. No. There are people who think that Star Wars is just eye candy, and what they don't realize is that there is so much more going on in Star Wars if you stop and really look at the underlying storyline and the characters and the messages. And that's why Lucas, I think, was so inspired by Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
In fact, several of the interviews I did with him, I brought up the subject of the power of myth and such. And George read a lot of those books, and he became good friends with Joseph Campbell, and he understood the power of the story and the power of myth, and the hero with 1,000 faces. And he was, I think George is a brilliant man, and someday I think people will give him the credit that he deserves. Not that he isn't, respected and admired today, but I think 100 years from now, he might even be thought of in even greater terms than that.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Mencken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel. Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books but can't find the time? Try listening to them on audio. Featuring sound effects, top-notch narrators, and music directly from the movies, Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. From Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren to Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, You'll recognize all of your favorite characters from the Star Wars galaxy. Listen to the newest stories in the Star Wars universe, like Star Wars Queen's Peril by E.K. Johnston, read by the Clone Wars star Catherine Tabor. And if you like the audio original Dooku Jedi Lost, keep an eye out for Dr. Aphra, a brand new audio drama read by a full cast, including Mark Thompson, Catherine Tabor, Jonathan Davis, and more. Dr. Aphra is on sale July 21st. Pre-order now. With Star Wars audiobooks, you'll have plenty of Star Wars listening to keep you entertained. Available wherever audiobooks are sold. He's like the Walt Disney of our time. I truly believe that. And I only met him once. I met him at the premiere of Solo, and it was probably 30 seconds, but I got to thank him for creating this mythology, and I was just overwhelmed just by being around this man. So you have been around him plenty. You've talked to him plenty. We're talking about all these great geniuses. You're talking. I'm talking to someone right now who has spent legitimate time with one of the great geniuses, George Lucas. What was it like to speak with him? And of course, you mentioned that you were talking to the man the first time you met him, the guy who created Star Wars. But when you talk with someone, you can kind of tell how their brain works and what they value as people. What stands out to you about George Lucas?
It's interesting you say that, because when you first meet George, he's really rather unassuming. I mean, you kind of, he's kind of quiet. He's not real outgoing. It's one of the things I found about him is he's extremely humble. He doesn't brag about anything he's done. He really cares about what he's doing. It's so important to him. It's not about the money. It's about, the story and getting it right. And I think the thing that impressed me the most about George was how comfortable he made me feel. He was extremely warm and welcoming. And he let me he answered every question I asked, even when there were a couple that were a bit where Lynn had to go, I don't know if you want to answer that, George. He's like, no, don't worry about that. I'll answer it, because this was before the prequels came out. So sure. I was trying to get out of him, what's going on? Are you going to be making these movies? There were so many times I'd interview George, and every time I'd interview him, there was always one or two questions like, are you ever going to get back to doing Star Wars again? And his answer usually always was, yeah, I still plan on getting back to it someday. And I'm thinking, okay, well, when is that? Is that next year? Can you give me a specific time frame? No, I don't know when, but I'll get back to it someday, And then, as the prequel started coming, we got a little more closer, and he started giving me a little more information. But, to be, it was a moment of, a little bit of, kind of, I can't believe I'm here, because, I as a 14-year-old and growing up with Star Wars and being so influenced, and so, it became a part of every aspect of my life, literally. And it defined in a lot of ways who I was and who I am. And so to have the opportunity to travel to Skywalker Ranch, and I'm talking about the first time, there were many times after that, but that first time, and to pull up to that main house, that beautiful Victorian main house, to walk up those steps and be greeted by Lynn and to be taken, it's like, going to see the wizard,
Sure.
Going up those steps and it's, elaborately and beautifully decorated. Everything about Skywalker Ranch is just exquisite, and that main house, George had his hand in every part of it, the decor, the design, the architecture. And I've often kind of been amazed, and I thought, how does this one person have so much talent and he's able to do all these amazing things? And when I went up there and I'm sitting in his office, and it's incredible. And as I meant to say, before I walked up the steps, there's this like glass case, and in it are all these little miniature props and from the movie. And what I most vividly remember was Indy's dad's little journal diary for the Grail.
Wow.
And that was in this little glass case but there would be little miniature Star Wars miniatures and stuff that were used in the filming of the films. But then, and that kind of gives you a taste, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see the toy maker that made all these things. And then you get up into his office, and there's the man sitting way over in the corner at his desk with a little light. And it's almost like Willy Wonka, kind of, as I walk in there, it's like all you hear is the, and he's over in the corner there, and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, there he is, and he walked over and made me feel comfortable immediately, complimented me on how I was doing with the fan club and the magazine, and then sat down, and it was like sitting there chatting with any other guy. I mean, at the same time, I had to keep sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is the man who created this entire, mythology, the Wars, that has infected me so much, but has affected the world in so many ways. Think about how many people whose lives have been changed because of what George created. Yeah. I mean, from all kinds of them, people whose careers were created, people who met their wives or their husbands or their best friends, and then they had kids after that. And I mean, when I think about, if you took George out of the equation and had he never existed, all the people's lives who would be different as a result of that. And you could say the same thing about Walt Disney, I mean, sure. There's certain people that come into the world and can make a huge change and a huge difference. And George Lucas is definitely one of those. I'm not sure I answered your question, but
No, you answered it beautifully. I just, like I've said, I just love hearing you speak about this because, your passion is there, and you've experienced wonderful things that people love hearing through you. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that. And you also mentioned the fan club, which of course, as so many of us know, thanks to you, we have things like Celebration and the Great Star Wars Fan Club and Bantha Tracks and just all of the great works. You kept the flame going for so long, my friend, when so many of us didn't have anything to grasp onto. And that is, we probably wouldn't be having Coffee with Kenobi if not for the great work that you did to kind of lead that. So you understand what it takes to kind of foster a community. And I think it's important that we continue to do that, especially in these challenging times.
Absolutely. And that's the beautiful thing about podcasts like yours, Coffee with Kenobi and others, is that, back in the day when I was doing this, there was no such thing as those. And the internet was really just starting at the beginning when I was starting to do the fan club. So, and I see the ability now with projects like what you're doing and how it can really build a community and bring people together and immediately start to hear about news that they didn't know about. I often wish that, and during my tenure, I wish there was more of all of that available, because it would have been so much easier to try to reach out to people and to get the news out, building a community is very important. And we built the fan club up at that time to the highest numbers it had ever been. It was an amazing experience to get the opportunity, to do the fan club and the magazine. And we had a whole 40,000 square foot warehouse with every Star Wars piece of merchandise you could possibly think of. It was kind of like, I used to describe it. When you would walk in our warehouse, it was like going into that end scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was just like aisle after aisle after aisle of boxes and boxes and boxes as far as you could see. And as in front of each of those boxes, we'd have a sample of what the items were in the box. So there were, Star Wars beach towels and Star Wars masks and all of the different action figures that were available at that time. Movable banks and clocks. And it was like stepping into and even for me, my son, who was just a little guy at that time, for him, it was just like magic because, he got to go into that warehouse and I would show him all this amazingly cool Star Wars products and toys and things. And of course, being a dad, I spoiled him and say, you can pick out 2 action figures you want, And so it was magic for him to get to come to Dad's work and see all that stuff. And then he got to go home with a couple new action figures, So,
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not.
Oh.
So yeah, it was, and it was around that time that I started kind of falling in love with Lincoln and became and really falling in love with Twain. I've been a big fan of Mark Twain's for a long time after reading his autobiography, but it was those times. So my office, everybody would ask me about that because even the folks from Lucasfilm, when they'd come out and visit, they'd come in my office and there was like pictures everywhere, and Mark Twain pictures, and they were always curious as to why I had those up, and I had to explain to them, my love of these guys. And I even had a chance to talk with Lucas very briefly one time after one of my interviews I did at Skywalker Ranch, and I had the opportunity to ask him about Lincoln, and he was a huge admirer of Abraham Lincoln, but he particularly liked Mark Twain. I remember having a brief conversation about Mark Twain and him saying that he was quite a fan of Mark Twain's and had really enjoyed several of his books he had read. I didn't get a chance to ask him which ones, but that made me feel even better to know that he admired both of those guys too.
If you could see my face right now, I'm going to have pain from smiling so much. That is so wonderful to think about that. I mean, you're talking about 2, juggernauts in their own industries. One is certainly much more outgoing, being Mark Twain than George Lucas. But just the notion that these 2 greats walking in each other's shoes, so to speak. Wow, that is fantastic.
Well, and not only that, but Lucas had and still has a real appreciation for history. And he, you could see it all throughout Skywalker Ranch, especially in his office. Obviously he loves art, and his museum that's going to be opening soon is his real passion. But he loved history in general too, and you could see that everywhere you went. When you went to that gorgeous library there at Skywalker Ranch, it's just I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful library. It's just incredible with the stained glass ceiling and such. It's mind-boggling. But I think that's one of the things I've always appreciated about Lucas was his appreciation for history. And, that shows in the Indiana Jones films, and it really showed in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, because he was really, pulling out characters from history that young Indy could meet. And each episode had him meeting somebody famous, Gandhi or Teddy Roosevelt, who are some of the others? I can't think of them right off the top of my head, but every episode had Houdini
too. I guess it's not.
Yeah, he met Houdini in an episode. Yep. And he loved history, and he did Red Tails.
Sure.
And so I love that part about him, is that he has curiosity about a lot of things. And it's funny because, as I said, he's very warm when you get to know him, but he's also, at the very first, he's very unassuming. He's very quiet. He's kind of, he's not, this really outgoing, give you a big hug, like, hey, how are you kind of guy,
Right.
He's very different from that. He is definitely one of those people from our time, Dan, that will be remembered hundreds of years from now. He's a mover and a shaker and a changer, and he's created something that I think will last as long as there's a civilization to appreciate it.
Here for sure. Yeah, he understood the power of the storytelling. He opens up our minds to so many possibilities. The ideas, that you mentioned, good versus evil, and as well as ideas like, people from different backgrounds can work together, can be best friends, can be brothers and sisters, can start their own kind of surrogate families in a way, and to create change. And we're certainly not trying to get political here, but certainly would be silly not to see the parallels, with COVID and the challenges we face today as people and as a culture and as a world. It's good to know that these mythologies and these stories can bring us back have the potential to bring us back to a better place where we can understand each other much more. So I thank you so much for your observations and your stories and just your overall good-natured self.
Well, hey, I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk with you, Dan. And, the main thing about Star Wars for me, and the thing I think that it does with others, is that it inspires. And that inspiration is so important, especially in our times today, to find the good in the world and to try to do what's right. And I think that the Star Wars films have not only entertained, especially during this COVID, and people getting the opportunity to watch the films and be entertained while they have to stay at home, but
yes,
they've inspired people to go on and do amazing things, and that's something that you can't put a price on.
No, you really can't. We instituted Star Wars Saturdays at our house, and it's my weekly struggle to get my wife to try to watch all the Star Wars movies, but Mason and I watch them. We have fun. Well, Dan,
that's awesome.
For sure. Well, Dan, if people want to continue the conversation with you and reach out and say hello, where can they get in touch with you?
They can find me on Twitter. I'm at the Dan Madsen, and on Facebook they can type in Dan Madsen Official, and they'll come to my Facebook page. And those are the two ways. I'm also on Instagram. I just really kind of got on there. Madsen8973 is my Instagram handle. So those are the three ways that people can really kind of connect with me. And if they want to reach out to me directly, they can private message me on one of those social channels.
I love it. Well, Dan, thank you again so much for coming on Coffee with Kenobi. I look forward to chatting with you often in the future.
Dan, me too. And we're definitely going to be talking Twain in the future too. Absolutely.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books? Try listening to them on audio, featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies. Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience, with stories from your favorite Star Wars movies, television shows, and comics. You'll have plenty to keep you entertained. Start listening now wherever audiobooks are sold. As we begin to wrap up the show, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-free, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be a part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk some Star Wars. It is a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends as well. I also want to thank all of my new and longtime friends who joined me in the CWK Cantina and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement and love being able to give back to you with CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. I want to thank Dennis Keithley, Jason Hall, Angela Sauce, Chris Kavarka, Aaron Harris, Alexander Moylan, Ross Halliban, Jeff Ellis, David Nicely, Jessica Berry, Colby Mead, Frank Mulder, LJ Souter, Dustin Mills, Robert Avila, Mark Suter, Nick Deco, Eric Struthers, Jared Cantor, Brian McKinney, Daz Davies, Thea Selby, Chris Metz, Caroline Maselli, Jim Capron, Blake Weaver, Dan Ream, Kurt McKellen, Christine, Simbad Tefterdarian, Ian Thompson, Alex Procasio, Hannah, Tyler Pompa, Connie Shee, Susan Gray, Chelsea Sansbury, Josh Boylan, Yancey Evans, Sagacious Crumb, and Greg McLaughlin. If you want an additional way to help out the show, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/support and join us in the Coffee with Kenobi Cantina. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, live video, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR. There are also a lot of ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and check us out on Pinterest. You can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, as well as on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other pop culture topics. And if you're considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired. Don't be afraid to take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our CWK sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere you want to go on the planet. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like this show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word. Go to iTunes and search Coffee with Kenobi and you'll see the show there. My circle of friends has grown so much because of each and every one of you, and it means so much to me that we have such a wonderful Star Wars community. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us on this week's Coffee with Kenobi. A huge thank you to Dan Madsen. I truly believe he is good for the soul, and it was wonderful to talk to him about what really matters in this world. And stories and storytelling are just one vehicle to help get that point across. I hope everybody has a great week and weekend. Stay safe. And if you're interested in joining us for our CWK Coffee with Kenobi book study every Monday night on Facebook Live, be sure to read the first 3 chapters of The Rise of Skywalker by Ray Carson. It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be like you're in my classroom talking about a Star Wars book. And remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.